Hello dear chess friends, welcome to the Chess Endgame course for gangsters. That's right, we don't read books because we want high quality audio and video lectures so we can get that perfect recall from visual learning in order to get great successes in our own tournament games. So this is rook versus pawn, again a relatively commonly arising endgame, and for the same reason that queen versus pawn is. And by the way, I do refer you to that video lecture number 21 in order to learn about those stalemate tricks. As you can see here, rook versus pawn, with the king and pawn in this formation, there is clearly a stalemate problem. But in this exact position, white can win. And if you're then thinking, what if this king is over here and maybe black has an extra pawn here and this is a queen, well then I recommend you see video lecture number 21, because queen versus pawn can also get quite complex. So, why is this popular? Well, black races his pawn down the board and he's clearly sacrificed a rook maybe for some of white's pawns. So maybe white had a pawn here and it was going to promote, so black had to sacrifice a rook, and that's why this is a relatively commonly arising position. How does white win? Well, obviously it's white to play, otherwise it would be stalemate, and we use the same theme that we saw hopefully in number 21, because we must block the rook's control and allow the king to escape. Now check. See, we play this with tempo, meaning that black is forced to do something. He must retreat to defend his pawn, and now we can play rook h8. Clearly there's a checkmating threat on h1, but besides, black is forced to play his move, and now check, and we take the pawn. So that's a very simple example. And now this might get a little trickier, since again we have this distant king. By the way, don't forget that if you are in a tournament game situation and your king is extremely close, perhaps at b3, then of course this isn't a study. There's no reason to learn this, because the moment that our king is back in the action, such material imbalances in the endgames don't matter, because it's just two pieces against the one pawn. But this is the whole principle of getting back, and we must rush to bring our king back in time. So it is a tricky thing, because black can use a body check with his king, using the fact that at the moment he has this wall, and if the white king were here, then he would be cut off by this wall. So first we play king e5, and now clearly black must support his king with must support his pawn with his king, and we continue. Note that black must continue in this way for this reason. After king e3, king c2 wouldn't be so great, but b3, this is why he couldn't advance his pawn earlier. Check. White has this wall, so he is forced back, and now the pawn is blocked, so we gain time. King a2, and this is very simple now, because we can reach either c2 or c1, and this lone pawn cannot protect both at the same time. The king can, but now here's the point: we lose a move. This is very instructive. So now black is in Zugzwang. Obviously, if he didn't have to move, as is the law in chess, then this might even be a draw. Yes, this would be a draw, but he must move, and this is forced. Since king b1 just loses the pawn automatically. And now here's the point. There we go. We reach one of these crucial squares, and now both rook and king control b2. And besides that, they just threaten to take the pawn. Okay, and that's a simple example again. Now we have cut off along the 5th rank. The move is rook b5. If king and pawn are insufficiently advanced, then it doesn't matter where our king is. It can be a8, a1, h1, or h8. Obviously h1 is ideal, but the whole idea is that now we bring our king to this square and the pawn is no threat. So why is this cut off along the fifth rank so good? Well, clearly this king, because there is no I file on the chessboard, cannot be shielded by this pawn, so it can never advance. And so black's only chance is to advance the pawn, but this is obviously no attempt at a win, and I'll show you why. So after king b7, what if black advances? Well, then we just continue and we see the point. Black can never aid his pawn, so the further this pawn marches, just the easier it is to capture it. And now, after this move, rook b1, okay, no cut off, but black is too slow. And that's simply why black cannot advance. And we just get this series of moves. Okay. Now h4, as I've shown before, just loses, and this is how. Okay, we can attack it at h3, but if it goes to h2, then we can just return, and that's game over. Next, this is a bit of a finesse. Okay, slightly subtler, but here, because black has opposition against our king and we cannot advance, it does look as though black could save this and get a draw. Just imagine if you played king a7 in your tournament game in this position. I would love to hear how you would feel about that. You know, if I were in your shoes after this series of moves, then it wouldn't be so nice. Here we are, and this is the point. The rook is attacked, it's forced back. Advance, and rook is attacked with tempo. See, as black's king advances, it continues to attack the rook, and so black gains time, and this is just very easy for him to draw. But going back, perhaps then, with reciprocal thinking, we can avoid this. Okay, we've realised that when the king reaches b3, it attacks our rook. So, when it reaches c3, excuse me, what am I talking about? So, what if we play rook b1? And this is in fact the solution. If you find this in your tournament game, I will be thrilled. Okay, because it shows that these videos are really working. Great. So, rook b1. The point is that king a7, as is the only real sensible alternative besides rook b1, makes no sense, because the king ultimately is going to reach a6 anyway, and king b7 to a6 takes just one move. So that's why king a7 doesn't make sense. And if you use logic, rook b1 does make sense. And clearly, it's the same principle as checking distance. When we want to get away from the king, we want as many squares as possible. And I'll show you why this wins now. Okay, we advance the king. Instead of going like this, we advance in just one move. And this is the benefit. Okay, if you played king c3, then we just advance. And then king c2, we just lose the pawn. So we just advance, and there you have it. King c2, rook takes b3, and now the pawn is lost. That's a nice example. And now, here is a very rare case in which actually the pawn promotes. g7. And now, as you can see, there's no way to protect g8, because we cannot reach h8 and we cannot reach g5. So we check. The trick is obviously king f7, rook h7, and if king g5, then rook h1 secures the draw, because white cannot promote immediately, and king f6, draw. Okay, but going back, we just keep checking, and now here's the point. White can play to g2, because there's no, there's no h0 for black to reach, so he cannot now fork, he cannot now produce a skewer against the king and pawn, and that's why, very simply, white promotes. And now last example, I don't think we have time, but you can see this Barber and Saavedra study that shows in fact that white does win, but it's very complicated and it's a very pretty masterpiece at that. So I recommend you to that endgame in the series. Thanks so much. PeterLalic signing off, saying good luck with your chess, and we're gangsters, but we fight with pieces, not with guns.